Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today we shall be doing a Blu-ray and DVD update for November/December of 2022. So let's of course begin with the Blu-ray, starting off with The Martian, starring Matt Damon. This is a Ridley Scott film, which to be honest I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Ridley Scott movies, as I've expressed in other update videos, and thankfully this film was one that I very much enjoyed. Overall, the directorial style is fantastically represented, with some really interesting techniques used to push the story forward, with it mainly revolving around the character of Mark Watney, played by Damon, who is left stranded on the surface of Mars thanks to a mission going horribly wrong, and when NASA presumed that Watney is dead, thankfully that is not the case, where we follow him on Mars thriving and surviving, and that's something that I really enjoyed as a concept, with it being a very edge of your seat style story at certain instances, where we watch him go from bad to worse in some areas, but then also manage to succeed, such as with his food supply, manages to ration out what food they brought to Mars, but also manages to successfully grow crops, which I thought was great, and the main character was very likable. And that's something that, despite there being no other characters for him to interact with, when he's videoing himself and almost vlogging to an extent his progress of surviving on Mars in a way to maybe keep himself sane, having something to talk to and sort of process his thoughts. I loved the comedic style of commentary that he brought to the table, and that's something that I enjoyed throughout the film, with it being a consistent theme where we watch him survive throughout. Overall, a very enjoyable movie and definitely exceeded my expectations, so that is The Martian. Next up we have 1917, a film directed by Sam Mendes. And this is a movie that, to be honest, I had zero interest in. I hadn't seen really any of the marketing for it when it was first released. However, I did catch on a recommended video a behind the scenes showing how they did what I would term really as the money shot, a phenomenal piece of cinematography showing the main character of Schofield running down a battlefield, avoiding obstacles and people running over the trenches. And it showed how this shot was done, with the main character running towards the camera, and with how phenomenal that looked, I instantly wanted to grab this movie, and I'm so glad that I did. It uses a trope that I've not seen too often in cinema, especially to this scale, and that is the single take trope, where it's as though the entirety of the film or episode of something, an episode of Mr. Robot springs to mind, it looks as though the entirety of it is done all in one take, bar a couple of moments in this film in particular, and it was an absolutely stunning way to represent this incredible story of two soldiers from the British side trying to cross enemy territory to deliver a message to stop a battle from going ahead, saving the lives of hundreds. And this was again a very edge-of-your-seat style movie, and for sure in terms of the overall scope and incredible amounts of emotional storytelling, a very gripping film that I would 100% recommend. If you're a fan of war films in particular, this is one that definitely should be in your collection and was an absolutely phenomenal experience. So that is 1917. Next up we have a film that I actually haven't watched as of yet. This Blu-ray is still new sealed, and that is The Godfather Part 3, or specifically with this cut, The Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone, which is an alternative rendition released in conjunction with the 30th anniversary of The Godfather Part 3, restored by Francis Ford Coppola to give us an alternative variation of the final film. And I'll be honest, I have never seen The Godfather Part 3. I don't know whether or not to just skip the original cut and watch this one instead, supposedly this is far better, or should I bear the pain and suffering that many have explained to me of what the original variation of the third film does to drag down this trilogy? So let me know in the comments which you feel I should do, and is this rendition in fact better than the original like many say? I'd be very intrigued to hear people's thoughts and opinions on this one, and more than likely once I have seen it, I'll feedback my thoughts in a future update video. So that is The Godfather Part 3. Next up we have the second Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie. This is Aqua Teen Forever Plantasm, which I recently did an unboxing / review video of. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on the movie, by all means you can check that out on the channel. But for what this film brought to the table in comparison to the first film, I felt this was far better, a lot more focused in terms of the story, without really relying on cameos and randomist sort of absurd humour. And with that in mind, I really enjoyed how this was very much a redemption story for the main three characters, who have a falling out in this film and must come back together to form the Aqua Teen trio to defeat a worser evil. And albeit it's a predictable film, I really enjoyed that concept, and for sure this has a lot of great laughs and very much improved animation in comparison to the original show. That's a huge benefit to this movie, making it stand out in comparison to the original film and the original series. So if you're a fan of Aqua, definitely check this one out. I'm hoping that with the success of this film, with it receiving mostly positive reviews from what I have seen, that hopefully that will ignite a revival for the original show. We shall see. So that is Aqua Forever Plantasm. Next up, we have the complete series release of Caprica, which is a prequel to Battlestar Galactica 2004, which is honestly one of my all-time favorite TV shows. I love the characters, the storytelling, and the music in particular in that show. And for this series, I was very intrigued to check it out, with it being set approximately 50 years prior to the events of the first season of Battlestar, and I really wanted to see where this story was going. The only thing that kind of put me off it was the fact that this show was cancelled prematurely. It was actually cancelled during its airing of episodes, and to be honest, I'm not even sure if all the episodes actually aired on television. Thankfully, all 18 of them are included on this Blu-ray set. I've actually had in the collection on DVD part 1 of this show, which I never got around to checking out. I've only seen a couple of clips of this series online, and it looked intriguing, with it being more so a sci-fi thriller rather than just a sort of war-style sci-fi storyline, so I'm intrigued to see what direction this show does go in. But with this being only part 1, I just never bothered checking it out. So it's good to have the complete series to go through and hopefully binge in a couple of sessions, since this series looks like something that'll be fairly easy to get through. For the Blu-ray release, I'm pretty sure this is either a German or maybe even a Swedish release, in fact. I had no idea this even had a Blu-ray release until recently, so I can thankfully add it to my collection of the other Battlestar Blu-rays. So anyway, that's the complete series of Caprica. I'll no doubt share my overall thoughts on this in a future update video. Rounding off the Blu-rays with a couple more TV shows, we have Season 9 of The Walking Dead, a 6-disc Blu-ray set of which I recently grabbed this, and I kind of have buyer's regret for having bought this. I grabbed this over eBay for fairly cheap, to be honest. I can't really complain about the price I paid for it. But The Walking Dead has very much been a love-hate show for me in recent years, and I recently did a video looking at my complete collection of the Blu-rays. It was part 1, looking at the first half of the show, and I picked this up so then I had something to kind of refer to in my second part, since it's been a while since I've seen this. And I'd gone through several of the episodes, and I gotta say, I really found this to be a lot more refreshing in comparison to what Season 7 and, God forbid, Season 8 had to offer. I couldn't stand that season. But with, I believe, showrunner Angela Kang taking over from this point onwards, supposedly there was a lot of improvements on the series, and I'll admit, with this being the final season featuring the main character of Rick Grimes, I was surprised to see how good of a direction this series was really going in, especially with the beginnings of the Whisperer War, and those characters were fascinating to me. A great concept of just normal human beings wearing zombie skin and managing to stay within a horde of zombies undetected and actually use zombies as weapons, whereby you could lead them to trample an entire camp or small civilization. Who knows? Definitely an intriguing concept that does appear to be explored heavily throughout both this season and Season 10, so I'm looking forward to watching this a little bit more, since I kind of strayed off from The Walking Dead when it was airing around Season 7. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this story does go in the future seasons going forward, and no doubt you can check out my videos on the channel relating to The Walking Dead, showing the complete collection. So far, Part 1 is available, and I'll make Part 2 available very soon. So that is The Walking Dead Season 9. And last up for the Blu-rays, we have Season 1 of the Chucky television show, which is supposed to be, to my knowledge, a continuation of the Don Mancini movies, being a follow-up to Cult of Chucky, which had some really bizarre cliffhanger endings, something that took me by surprise, and so I believe those stories do pick up in this show, which is something I really want to see explored, and a television show, in my eyes, is the perfect way to do exactly that. This is a 2-disc Blu-ray set consisting of 8 episodes in total, and the show recently wrapped up its 2nd season, so hopefully that'll get a Blu-ray release later down the line, and once I have checked out the show in its entirety, I'll be sure to make a video reviewing and giving my overall thoughts and opinions on the series. So that's going to do it for the Blu-rays for this update video. Let's now move on to the DVDs. Moving on now to the DVDs, first up we have the Robin Williams film Patch Adams, which is based on true events, obviously reinvented to an extent for the sake of Hollywood, shall we argue, but I found this to be overall a very inspiring film, and the charisma of Robin Williams' acting is absolutely incredible. I loved his rendition of the character in this film, Patch Adams, and how it begins with him basically feeling ignored by medical professionals and wanting to strive and help others is his fuel for going to medical school and becoming a doctor, with a twist where he genuinely believes that laughter is the best medicine. And I loved how this was portrayed on screen, with nobody really understanding his point of view of listening to your patients and wanting to actually make a credible difference to their lives. And I loved how there were so many opposing characters to what he brought, such as Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. I found his role to be very fun in that he was the complete opposite to what Williams's character had. And regardless of them both being very clever at their studies, no matter what, he just could not get his head around the idea of wanting to connect with their patients, in a sense, unprofessionally, to make the patient feel better about themselves. Really great, inspiring stuff from the acting in particular, with some very dark twists as well. A very fun film that's honestly very inspiring, and for sure one of the best from Robin Williams, so that is Patch Adams. Next up, we have a film that I've had in the collection for a little while and just hadn't really gotten around to watching, and that is Signs, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. And this was a film that at first I was just thinking would be a gimmicky kind of psychological sort of sci-fi horror. Thankfully, no gimmicks to this one. I'll give credit where credit is due. This was quite a suspenseful film, relying more so on the unknown and how the characters react to their surroundings, such as it beginning with a farm in Pennsylvania, with the main character portrayed by Mel Gibson discovering crop circles in his fields, trying to come to terms with what this could perhaps mean, thinking it's neighbours playing practical jokes. And over the course of the film, we get some slight glimpses of what come across as extraterrestrials. One of the best jump scares being at the very start, where we see one of them, a shadowy kind of figure on the rooftop of one of the houses, and as the film continues, it escalates into genuine sightings of aliens. What I personally found to be the most enjoyable aspect of this film is the psychological torment that the main characters go through, that being the Hess family, where the children start to believe that there could potentially be an alien threat to planet Earth, having picked up some sci-fi books and starting to see similar signs of what may be actually happening in real life from the book, and then slowly the adults start to believe as more evidence comes to light. News reports in particular being the most interesting and fascinating bits, with a lot of build-up to some really fun, suspenseful sequences, and that personally was one of the main things that kept me interested throughout. Definitely one of Shyamalan's best films in my eyes, so that is Signs. Next up, we have a film that I had absolutely zero interest in checking out. This is THX 1138, which is known as the first film directed by George Lucas before he went on to obviously go ahead and create Star Wars. And this film I found to be an absolute drag. It's only a fairly short film as well, but it maybe took me about 3 attempts to actually get this one going. And when I finally did, yeah, I'll be honest, buyer's regret with this one. I only really picked this one up since a friend mentioned it in conversation when we were talking about the recent Star Wars series, Andor, and the Narkina 5 storyline in Andor, when the main character ends up in a space prison. He compared those scenes, both visually and in terms of the oppression that the prisoners went through, to themes shared in this film, and said it might have been worth a watch, even though it's not great. And I'll say I enjoyed the visual aspects of this movie. For sure, some incredible set pieces, some very imaginative ideas, but the story fell flat for me, with there being not much explored with the idea of the government literally oppressing feelings such as love, and there being a complete lack of freedom. There is something there that I thought was interesting, but the story overall fell flat for me. Definitely could have been a lot better. I would love to hear other people's opinions or interpretations of this film. By all means, if you've seen it, drop your thoughts in the comments below. So that is THX 1138. Next up we have Ghost in the Shell, which is an anime science fiction film from the year 1995. And this features some incredible visuals. I love the stunning animation using just your normal cell animation, combined with some really great CGI shots. and the philosophical messages behind this film I thought were absolutely fantastic, mainly revolving around the main character of Motoko Kazanagi, who is a sort of police-style agent in the futuristic setting of Japan in 2029. And with the prone hacker known as the Puppet Master targeting people where technology is kind of mankind's downfall, with cybernetic augmentation being a normal, popular kind of thing, people become all the more vulnerable to being hacked and having their personalities changed to a point where they don't even recognize themselves as people. And that's an ongoing theme where the main character starts to question themselves as a cyborg and starts to wonder what it would be like if they were a human being. Some really great story threads throughout this film, overall quite short to my surprise. I believe there is a sequel which is sadly non-related to this film and isn't considered canon, I guess you could word it. So it isn't a direct sequel, but does have some interesting shared themes, so I may pick that up in the future. But for sure a film I would recommend. Definitely one of the best animated films I have seen all year, so that is Ghost in the Shell. Next up we have a handful of films directed by Kevin Smith, of which I've been slowly over the course of this year building up my collection of his films. And having seen Clerks, I've very much enjoyed that as of late. And Mallrats is supposedly a prequel to Clerks, which I thought was quite interesting, this being the second film from Kevin Smith. And I thought this was okay, it wasn't anything special, it was just a generic romantic comedy in my eyes where the two main characters coincidentally lose their girlfriends around at the same time, and end up going to a shopping centre to kind of relate and share their thoughts and feelings with one another, only to then get involved in a convoluted scheme with the characters Jay and Silent Bob to try and win back their girlfriends. Overall, not a bad film, had some standout moments, a lot of great dialogue in particular, which I enjoyed, but nothing special in my eyes, so that is Mallrats. Chasing Amy I found to be a much better film in comparison to Mallrats, with this sharing similar themes, that being again a romantic comedy, but this time the writing was a lot more complex and a bit more personalized, looking at the character that Ben Affleck portrays of Holden and his success and failures with a relationship revolving around a woman that he essentially cannot have, and that is the character of Alyssa, played by Joey Lauren Adams, where at first he feels that he has a shot at a relationship with this person, he begins to lust after her romantically, only for a sudden twist where it's revealed that she is actually a lesbian, that she is gay with another woman, and therefore he cannot have this person. And so this slowly eats away at him, where he decides that even though he cannot be romantically involved with this person, he still wants to be around them, and so he decides that he wants to befriend her, but this is not the answer to his question, where instead it backfires and eats away at him, where he does then reveal that he wants to be in a relationship and that he loves her. And that starts Alyssa questioning her own sexuality. Really great film, some great concepts, and the premise in itself is something that I found to be fairly unique. For sure, some of the best acting I have seen in a Kevin Smith movie, so that is Chasing Amy. Set approximately 10 years after the original film, we have Clerks II. And this honestly might be my new favourite Kevin Smith movie. I haven't laughed through a comedy so consistently in a very long time, and this was an absolute delight. The writing in particular is fantastic, with many throwbacks and callbacks to other Smith-related projects, obviously looking at the first film and following up on these characters, who are still in a very similar role with it being a customer-facing job, where the original convenience store burns down and so both Randall and Dante have to move on, this time in the fast food industry, and with similar themes of just talking trash behind the counter and manipulating and laughing at customers as well. There is a lot more to these characters where they want to progress and move on from this kind of job role, and Dante is planning to do exactly that, where he plans to leave for New Jersey, and this becomes all the more convoluted where his relationship starts to break down, where he begins an affair with the retail manager at the fast food place portrayed by Rosario Dawson, and she was honestly my favourite character in this film. Delightful dialogue and overall a great presence on the film, and someone that I do hope to see in the third Clerks film, which came out quite recently. I've obviously not watched that as of yet, but I will likely add that to the collection sometime very soon. So Clerks 2, if you're a fan of the first film and you like the Kevin Smith movies, definitely a movie I would recommend. It was a lot of fun. And last up for the Kevin Smith related movies for this update video, we have Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. And I feel as though I enjoyed this a lot more than most, where this film has some absolute stinker reviews online, some very entertaining ones at that. With this film really being more interesting for the behind the scenes kind of content, with Smith wanting to make a film mostly revolving around the Jay and Silent Bob characters to make another film with Jason Mewes, where Mewes himself as an actor has sadly had various internal conflicts with drug abuse and drug addiction, and was apparently an absolute nightmare on the set of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And so Smith wanted to make another film with Mewes in the roles of these characters to create some newer and much better memories of these characters and making a film around them being a lot more fun. And with this film, it's supposed to be satirizing the ideas of remakes, reboots, and sequels, with Hollywood more or less constantly churning out sequels and other nostalgia-baiting bullshit. And I can see those ideas represented in this film, but they are not really fully explored, in favor of really just making another sort of copycat film, and that coming across as basically more or less the same as what we had with the first Jay and Silent Bob movie, that being a road trip to Hollywood to stop Hollywood from doing something with the Jay and Silent Bob likeness. And albeit it does have some fun dialogue and some really interesting sequences throughout, it does fall flat on its face in my eyes and was just an okay film. It was entertaining for what it was. I did like a lot of what the characters had to offer. The opening scene in particular I found to be very hysterical, where the police finally catch the two characters for growing weed. But beyond that, it's just a borderline, far too late in the game stoner comedy. Not great. So that is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. The next few movies I have to show are all related to the Chucky franchise, of which if you want to hear my full thoughts and opinions on every film in that series, then by all means you can check out my collection overview where I go into detail of each individual movie and what I personally liked and disliked about those films as I rank them from my favourite to my least favourite. But to give some brief opinions on these movies that I grabbed as of late, the Child's Play remake I actually liked a lot more than I thought I would. It's an interesting reinterpretation of the Chucky doll, of which I personally felt that with this more so focusing on modernizing the character in relation to modern technology, that this really could have stood on its own 2 feet without relying so heavily on the Chucky doll, but the departure is heavy enough where you don't really think too much about the original Child's Play movie, especially since the idea of a serial killer's soul being stuck inside a doll is not even relevant to this film at all. Essentially, it's kind of lazy the way this doll is written, with the AI corrupting inside, where the doll starts to struggle with the distinction between good and evil. But otherwise, it's a fun film with some interesting deaths and violence throughout, so definitely worth a watch if you're into your horror stuff. Next up, we have Seed of Chucky, which is a very mixed bag for a lot of people. Seems to be a love or hate kind of film. Personally, I liked it quite a lot more than I thought I would. The ending of Bride was very bizarre, where Tiffany, the other doll in the franchise, gives birth to another doll. And this film is very much focusing on that doll trying to find its own purpose in life, trying to find its own identity, and wanting to meet its parents, being obviously Chucky and Tiffany. So some really interesting themes. This film is more so comedy focused, which I thought was a fun departure from what we've seen previously. Curse of Chucky was restrictive in the setting of the film, with the majority of this movie taking place in a very creepy sort of haunted house style setting. But there was a lot of mystery to unfold with this character of Nika and why her family is being targeted by the killer doll, or obviously the soul of Charles Lee Ray, by this point in the franchise, and there was a lot to unfold on that particular idea, with some very gory and interesting deaths throughout, and some great sort of internal conflicts from within the family. So definitely a step up in the right direction in some ways, but a little bit of a drop in others. And that takes us into Cult of Chucky, which wasn't great in my honest opinion. It had some fun ideas and was overall a very creative film, with there now being multiple Chuckies targeting specific characters throughout the franchise, even going back to the original child, Andy Barclay, who is now grown up in this film, who still has the severed head of the original Chucky doll. And whilst investigating more murders in relation to the Chucky character, he discovers that there are more Chucky dolls out there, and that the curse of Chucky continues to reign supreme on other dolls, with Charles Lee Ray's soul still out there targeting others, including Nika from the previous movie. So definitely some interesting themes, which is, like I mentioned before, I believe there is a continuation of this film, with a lot of the cliffhangers going into the television show, which I'm looking forward to checking out. And to round off this update video, we have several television shows, beginning with Season 1 of 24, a show that I've always wanted to watch and just never really had the urge to purchase. This was a complete blind buy. I just picked this up for, I think it was about 50p, because of how as new the condition of this seems to be in. It's a very clean condition, and one of these sort of slimline style box sets. I thought it was worth grabbing for that price. I don't imagine getting round to this box set anytime soon, but I've heard great things about the series, so this will be one to likely put on the back burner for a much later date. So that is Season 1 of 24. Next up, we have the complete series box set of the Channel 4 British comedy Green Wing, which I was mainly intrigued to pick this up because of the cast involved, comedians such as Mark Heap in particular and Tamsin Greig. I was intrigued to check out this show for, and I've seen a couple of episodes. So far, so good. It hasn't caught my attention fully as of yet, but I will, of course, continue to watch this show, and I'll more than likely feature this in a video in the near future if it does impress enough to give it a full recommendation. So that is the complete series of Green Wing. Next up, we have Season 5 of Robot Chicken, which is one of my favourite Adult Swim animated shows. And in terms of stop-motion animation, this series is absolutely stunning. Usually it's something I'll have on in the background, but typically it does draw my interest and attention, not only with the fantastically written comedy, but the visuals are phenomenal. And with this containing yet another 20 episodes of the show, the 100th episode in particular is by far one of my favourites. So many really fun callbacks to previous characters and sketches on the series, but also it manages to continue the story relating to the cybernetic chicken and his war against the scientist character. So overall, some really great stuff in this particular season set. It's just such a shame that the show doesn't really have that much of a following here in the UK, to my knowledge. Seasons 1 through to 4 were brought out on DVD in this country, but 5 onwards, sadly, you'll be looking to spend a lot more in order to get hold of those for your collection. But that's Season 5 of Robot Chicken anyway, a very enjoyable season of the show. Next up, we have the complete series set of My Life as a Teenage Robot, Seasons 1 through to 3, which this was a complete blind buy for me personally, and I've still not watched this as of yet. I've heard great things about it. A close friend of mine recommended this one to me, and in terms of the content, I'm excited to see what this show does have to offer, especially with it being supposedly a coming-of-age style story revolving around a robot in high school called Jenny. And supposedly the comedy is fairly light-hearted, but in some ways supposedly similar to other Nickelodeon shows such as Rocko's Modern Life and Invader Zim, to name a couple. So since I enjoyed those shows so much, I'm hoping that this will be another one that I do take to quite quickly, and I'll more than likely do a video of this later down the line if it proves to be a fun series. So that is My Life as a Teenage Robot. And to conclude, we have a couple of box sets that I've already featured in their own individual videos on the channel, the first of which being the complete series set of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, a phenomenal cartoon series, definitely one that I feel could have had a lot better. In terms of a DVD release, for more on that you can check out my video on the channel, but the show in of itself is absolutely fantastic, beautifully animated, so many wonderful, memorable and very creative characters at that, and for sure a great series to revisit. So that is Foster's Home. And finally, we have the complete series DVD box set of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, a fantastic series, albeit limited in the animation for the majority of the series, the voice acting and writing in particular. There's so much passion behind this show, especially the performances, which add a lot in my eyes to the comedy value, the delivery of certain lines, and the way the show has become such an iconic part of Adult Swim is, in my eyes, one of the many reasons why it stuck around for so long. And like I mentioned before when talking about the recently released Aqua Teen movie, fingers crossed there'll be some form of revival for the show going forward, since I felt that this series was very unfairly cancelled, and it does have a lot of heart still left in it to carry on a little bit further. So that's the complete series set of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. You can check out my unboxing video for more details on this set in particular, and a couple of controversies surrounding it as well. So that's going to do it for this Blu-ray and DVD update video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts and opinions on any of the titles that I've featured throughout this video. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe.
Are you threatening me?